City of Detroit. You're from the city. What led you into this love with arts and performing arts and events and where you're at now?
Yeah, it's probably my upbringing, my family, and just growing up in the black community. Arts is just central, even if it's related to the church. The arts are just central to your growing up, and the rhythm and the music and the appreciation for the color and the movement. It's all in there. So I think essentially there, my mother was the one at our church who wrote the plays, directed the plays, decorated the church basement for events and things, and I was her little protege. And she started me out real early learning poetry and going to various church locations or social organizations within the black community. I would do public speaking and that kind of thing real early, from the age of 4, actually.
What church?
Mount Olive Baptist Church. And Mount Olive Baptist Church had the building there on Woodward. Was the first black church to build from the ground up a building on Woodward Avenue, and it's right there on Woodward between Boston and Chicago. The church would have been 100 years old in 2016, but the pastor there in the congregation lost that building, and then a whole lot of things had to change the name of the deal, and so just missed its century mark. But the church was built by black folks basically coming up here from the South looking for new economic opportunities and hoping to find less oppression.
Okay, so that's like a stone's throw from the Gordy Mansion, basically.
Yeah, it is. As a matter of fact, when the church started, it was on Farnsworth, between Beaubien and St. Antoine. That's what I grew up understanding. But St. Antoine, I found out, is the proper pronunciation. So the church was on that block, started in what had been a Jewish synagogue. And, following that whole history where when black people moved into Detroit, there was this one particular area, rectangular area of Detroit that black people could live in. Mm-hmm. And the Jews who moved in here also found discrimination. So they were in a particular area. When they were able to acquire some economic opportunities, they moved out of that area. Black people moved in, and that's what happened on Farnsworth. And the church moved into a old Jewish synagogue. And so it happened that at the corner of Farnsworth and St. Antoine, what we called Old Man Gordy, Barry's father, had his printing company. And my mom had a delicatessen. She and her first husband, and then with my dad, who was her second husband, they had a delicatessen across the street from the Gordys. So all the elders in that neighborhood knew the Gordys, even to the point when the children gave the parents their 50th anniversary, they invited several members from this church who had been friends of their family for a lot of years.
Ain't that something?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so entrepreneurship is something that you've been groomed in. I had no idea about the delicatessen or anything else, so you're just sparking more and more questions. Where was the delicatessen? What led to that form of business, and what was that like?
Yeah, well, I was a very, very young child. I have memories of being 3 years old in the basement of that delicatessen, surrounded by cases, stacked cases of chips and pops. And, it was like the wonderland that I remember. My mother acquired the delicatessen from her first husband. He died early in the marriage. And so she acquired it. And then when she married my father really wasn't the entrepreneurial type.
Okay.
And so he convinced her within a short period of time to actually sell the space. And when I was growing up, I had some ideas about some entrepreneurial activities. My father would talk me out of them every time because he really was, he told me one time that he wanted to know what his work hours were, knew when his checks were coming, and not have to work so hard because the delicatessen was, constant work. You had to constantly restock, work it, clean it, constantly the paperwork and all the things involved. It wasn't really his thing. And so the whole entrepreneurial deal for me didn't come back until many years later when I was probably in my late 30s when I really started turning back towards an entrepreneurial lifestyle.
Okay, now that type of spirit, as I do think that it's that echoing thought process and that ethic. As I was talking to someone we mutually know, Frida Sampson, earlier today, like some things can get ingrained into our thought process. And one of the things ingrained into your thought process as a child was entrepreneurship is difficult and working a job is, I guess, a easier approach towards life. Whether it be planned that way or just that was the interpretation. So what do you think were some of the obstacles? Was it just the ebb and flow of it all, of your father, like he just didn't want to get to that grind, or was it more so that at the time you had a lot of opportunities with employment that just seemed to be lower fruit on the tree, as they say?
Well, I would say that, everything is development. And it took me a while to develop what it was, to come into an understanding of what it was I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I also think it was a process of trying to fulfill that work ethic, of being able to get a job and hold a job and acquire a position in a job, that my father, coming off of a sharecropper's situation, just one step above enslavement down in Louisiana, and my mother coming from a father who owned, the family owned land, and my mother's father had people sharecrop for him. And so there were two different experiences there. And so there was that. But after a while, for me, it just became a question of my character and my personality. Okay. And after a while, it just was true for me that what I found as a lifestyle and a work life that fit me the best was an entrepreneurial life. But I came into it slowly and learned as I was doing. I had a lot of on-the-job training to get to understand myself as an entrepreneur and as a consultant, as opposed to being an employee.